isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will.
Welcome to Perspective, a podcast for wedding creators, where we sit down often with a special guest and talk about our many years of experience in the wedding industry so you can learn from us and grow your wedding business. Hi, I'm Simon.
And I'm Greg.
Together, we are Cinemate Films, two Scottish-based wedding filmmakers who love nothing more than drinking coffee and talking to others in the wedding industry. And we've teamed up with Photography Farm to bring you 6 special episodes in anticipation of Thrive Brighton on the 22nd and 23rd of October at the Leonardo Royal Hotel. This episode is, of course, sponsored by PickTime, but I'll get on to that a little bit later in the podcast. Good morning, Greg. Who are we talking to today?
Good morning. We are talking to Daniel Knight Harris. Hello, Daniel. How are you doing?
Hello, Daniel.
Good. Yeah, good. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for bearing with us as we had technical issues. Seems to be a running theme of this Thrive series that we had technical issues before podcasts.
Joys of
Wi-Fi. I decided to build a garden shed that had a low-key internet, so it's on me, really.
Well, that'll help with like productivity. If you can't get all those YouTube videos loading, you just have to edit.
Yeah, I can edit within an inch of my life, but sales calls right now, we're working through stuff.
Are you getting to weddings and couples are confused because you don't look like a potato from your voice calls?
To be honest, they're just so blown away by the handsomeness that that's all we're left with. No,
of course.
I think the biggest thing from going from video call to in-person stuff, I'm quite tall, so people are just like, you're squished into this box. I'm a bit of imagine someone who looks like a rugby player but has no proficiency on a rugby field. So it's sort of like wasted width.
Yeah.
I look like a big friendly giant, but with no sportsman abilities.
I know you've adjusted your camera angle with a couple of photographers' books, but we still get that sense of looking up at you, which is kind of nice. It adds to the realism of actually being with you. It's good. Thank you.
It's so intentional. It's purely to create gentle fear in two people that have done this a lot versus someone who hasn't in any way done this at all.
That's right. I mean, look, we speak to some amazing creative individuals. That's why we have to like a tag team, because I'm not brave enough to battle you myself. So
it's final boss every week.
Yeah. Anyway.
Before we get any further, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What is it you do for anyone who might not have heard?
So I'm Daniel Knight Harris. I'm a photographer. I definitely started not necessarily in weddings and have gentled my way over. I still am in every sense an art director. So I look at every sort of piece of the puzzle, have like a broad top-down look at stuff and try and build the picture. And I work with couples in a very like invested way over the course of 1 to 2 years to sort of build that visual away from sort of there being a high number of planners who are design led. And it's a bit of a niche that I found myself in because of my background. I used to work in advertising, working on commercials and sort of like campaigns for brands and within that creative director role. I've always had photography sitting in, sometimes in the background, sometimes in the foreground. It's moved into sort of being this full time for a decent old wedge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now so like you mentioned, you have your commercial work, and that's separate from your wedding work. Your commercial work is under Daniel Alexander Knight Harris. Is that your full name?
So we just chuck a middle name in there just for extra vibes.
I mean, look, I am married to my wife, obviously, and she's only got 2 names, and she's amazed because I have 2 middle names. So my name is Simon Richard Alexander Ferguson. So there's like, we have to acknowledge our privilege here, Daniel, because it's a rock star lifestyle that we have.
All those middle Alexanders.
I'm collecting names as I move down the street daily. I'm just asking people what their names are. Can I add that in? Is it too big a faff? How many flight booking changes do I need to do at this point? How many times are they going to charge me?
I don't even need to ask. You can tell by the way people walk. You know, those people with just two names, they walk in a different way. It's
yeah, my mum's got just 2 days where I've been like, where's your middle name at? And she's like, my parents didn't really plan.
Didn't care.
Yeah. So I basically just said that information so that people know where to go if they wanted to check out Daniel's commercial work. In fact, do you want to tell us more about your commercial work before we kind of get into weddings? Because
absolutely,
work and influences blend into each other.
It definitely pulls over a lot of the sort of like production background and technical sort of, I guess, depth, and which maybe expedited my journey in weddings. Mm-hmm. So I started working in music specifically. So moving from doing sort of live shows through to moving into sort of press campaigns, then album covers. At one point, spending 3 years at Sony Music just on their music video team and stills campaign team. So I had like that was a pretty hardcore sort of that was sort of middle way through that sort of career point. And then I jumped back to freelance again and just carried it through. And you get to a sort of age where you go, hey, the bands have kind of stayed 22 and I'm moving into my 30s here. And I still do creative direction for bands. Sort of, I normally take on like 2 or 3 projects a year because that's with a full wedding season about where the line is. And they're depthy. They cover sort of everything from album artworks to sort of concepts to how they might present their daily sort of uploads on TikTok. To it's changed as a landscape quite a lot since I first started. That being 2012, so we're talking a little while ago. And I actually started up in Scotland. I don't know which part you guys are in, but I was jumping between Edinburgh and Glasgow 3 times a week to shoot shows for NME.
Yeah. Okay. So you I mean, did you base yourself in Edinburgh or?
I studied up there, so I did my undergrad and masters at Edinburgh.
Okay. Did you go to school in Edinburgh?
I wish, having now seen what the schools look like, and having walked past a few when they're sort of more castle-y than what they offer down in London. Yeah,
they're crazy. So. What do you like? What aspects of that part of your career kind of bled into weddings and being a wedding business supplier, I suppose?
So I guess like sort of imagine the art directing thing meant a lot of different sort of comedian moments happened. So the music sort of hit a point where it started to move into commercial work and fashion work and stuff directly for brands instead. And at various point, I shot one band's wedding. So the lead singer was getting married. And I was like, you know what? I had a really good time with this. And that sort of planted the seed. That was 2016, so a little while ago. And I typically do 2 or 3 a year for friends who are getting married. And I think that's normally a pretty gateway drug for most folks. But at the time, I was sort of moving then into sort of being an art director in advertising. I'd stepped out of music, so started just doing sort of campaigns for like Leica, Pinterest, Doc Martens, in a sort of all-encompassing creative director role where I'd sit in an ad agency, deal with teams of like 30 to 50 on set. And it was sort of just working with a lot of toys. You had a lot of lighting, you had a lot of post work. You had to build teams and flex them in line with budgets. And you got like a really hardcore approach to both production, handling a crap ton of documents all the time, talent casting, pretty depthy experience with color grading, editing, post, storyboarding. It just meant you had like a really meticulous process. And although weddings in some ways don't need that sort of like background and training, it just means that I feel very chilled on wedding days because I don't have to deal with a lot of that. I think some people come into weddings thinking they are like very, very stressful and things are disappearing all the time. I sit there being like, I actually got 11 hours to get this done. I'm good. We're okay.
Yeah.
And I don't even, so I've like not to jump too ahead, but I have one camera set on a single frame, so it's only taking one frame when I choose to, and then I've got a manual focus camera, so I'm not moving particularly fast or encompassing all of the technology stuff. I'm just being as specific as I was back when I was storyboarding something and really pre-planning. And the nice thing about weddings is it's a bit more like theater. Things are just rolling and stuff's happening, and there's noise there, there's quiet here, and you're just responding to stuff, and you're not being prescribed to shot lists. So it feels a bit of a playground. So yeah, the training was, if anything, it was like, I know all this stuff and I can use it when I need to. And sometimes I don't need to use any of it. And that's great. And some days I'll need to bring in some aperture heads and create like a really, really beautiful sort of art directed set design scene with a collaborator. And it just means I have that high and low. And I have some clients who really lean heavily on editorial sides and really love when I do sort of like more styled things. And some people who want me for pure documentary, and it's really lovely being able to bespoke it specifically to each incoming couple.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people from the art director, creative side of the world, where it is very much like setting up for the one shot, might struggle with the run and gun side of things, just documenting a wedding, but you were quite happy to just meld into that and do the different style.
I almost just feel that, I think as Imagen versus commercial, where you have a set thing and you've got a lot of time to get it done in. When you're commissioning that, you don't talk about style so much. You just go, I like this person's work, or I don't like this person's work. And you look through 100 books and you're like, this is the guy, let's talk to him. And he fumbles all of the agency chats. And then you're like, this guy's kind of more palatable to a client and still kind of gets it done. And you're just looking at the work and what ceilings they can hit, and you get a really good feel for that. I feel like in weddings, we genreify stuff really heavily. So editorial, documentary, all of these sort of like, I think they're more sometimes to help couples understand. But truthfully, I feel as a career and as a sort of like focus of photography, it's quite blended, and you need a bit of everything, and you need to have experience doing all of it. And eventually you have a voice and an eye and a way of moving through a wedding. And there's stuff that's happening and there's stuff that you have control over. So I generally think that I put out a few posts every so often, just trying to sort of gently help couples when they're looking for who they might want to commission. And just say, don't get so bogged down in the words. Just look at the work. Do you like it? What do you like it? What do you respond to? Because often people come onto sales calls with me and they're like, I love this about your work. I love this about your work. And it's just like, sometimes I'll chuck a word to it and it's like totally unaligned with what I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
But all that really mattered is that work caught their eye and they wanted to have a chat.
Yeah. So I kind of leading on to what Greg was talking about, kind of taking control for moments at a wedding where you are able to do that. Do you ever, I don't want to say get confused, because that's not the right word. But like, no. It's more like, so we've had a couple of conversations recently about how wedding days, they have moments like bridal preps where you can go in and you can gently suggest, go by the big window, for example, right, for the nice light and all that kind of stuff. And kind of where the balance between what a wedding should be or what it shouldn't be, and how much control a photographer or a filmmaker should take in the role on a wedding day. And I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts coming from that commercial world where you do have so much control. Do you take control in those specific areas like bridal preps where you can move someone to a window, or are you more like full on documentary, like you're there to capture what this day is?
No, I'm definitely the former. I get involved, but I think there's a way of doing things in a way that it feels a part of the day, and the photography can feel a part of the enjoyment of the day. Yeah, I think there is a huge skill to that. And I think the couples that end up working with me, we have such a decent run in, and we have loads of touch points over the course of the year, because I like meeting up with people. I like doing at least 2 consultations, and they are just kept really relaxed. And it means when I get to bridal preps, I've been there for the day before for the rehearsal. I'm a part of the experience for them, and I feel like that's really important. The bridal prep is part of the day, is the enjoyment of the photography rather than the sort of like shuddering when that camera comes around the corner. So there's stuff that I'll see in the like iRecce. That's something I've never lost from my like previous work. I go down the day before, I go to the rehearsals, I spend extra money on the hotel that night, and just being there, even if I'm not shooting a welcome party, just puts people at ease, gets people used to your presence. And then I shoot on smaller cameras than I need to at certain points in the day. I don't use lens hoods. I know that's going to break people's hearts, but they just make cameras look big and scary sometimes. And for example, the wedding I just had on the weekend, which was up sort of in the Cairngorms, we were just like, it was kind of fun. It was just about keeping it playful, light, easy. Like, they were there having fun. If I ever change the dynamic of that, I've not done a good job. And I know to just, I got to ease off, but I don't get to that point. As a photographer in those scenarios, and I know as filmmakers in that scenario, you keep an eye on the room. You feel the energy. You know when things are feeling a bit more tense or anxious, or if someone's feeling emotional, and you just know, hey guys, I'm just going to leave you for a few minutes. Why don't you give me a text when we want to roll a little bit more? And I try and I'm very heavily involved in the timelining. And I try and really make sure that the bridal prep's kind of like an hour and a half to 2 hours, so that it means that there's never pressure. There's never sort of pageantry of stuff. There's so much time just to sort of like let things happen gently. And I can have really sort of like therapeutic chats with the bride and be like, hey, we've kind of, do you want to know what's coming next? Like, how are you feeling? Do you want to just take a few minutes? And we just generally have like a rapport going. And I always go, hey, let's, if you're feeling a little bit stressed or anxious, let's just get the girls in, let's get some drinks out. Let's just let's kind of like get into stuff here. And there's such like there's a skill to people handling. And it isn't so much like, I see it as a job more than just being like an additional friend for that morning.
Yeah.
It makes it so much easier to go, hey, let's stand by the window, because I think the light's looking amazing. You look so good there. And it's just like you're just sort of like feeling your way through a moment that's very intimate for them, and you're just being gentle with it.
Yeah, an invisible hide of guidance.
Yeah, it's just a helping hand. And also like they want to feel the best version of themselves, and they have trust in you. Hopefully you've built that trust by that point. But I think all the additional touch points that I do means that when I'm sort of like, hey, think this might work better for it, or let's flip it out, or I've honestly walked into some bridal preps where they've been so self-aware of the fact the room isn't the prettiest thing in the world. And then I'll go doco style. Then I'll go, hey, it's just all about you guys now. We're just going to focus on this room just being fucking fun. I don't know if I can swear, sorry.
Yeah, you can swear.
Yep.
Awesome. I swear a lot.
So you're saying that your shooting style changes depending on the vibe of the room?
Yeah, hell yeah. It's got to. And I think it's really important to flow with what's happening in front of you, and being able to pivot on just on a whim. I used a lot of flash the other day just because they had a real aesthetic they were trying to hit, and every single thing that was happening over the course of the day was referential to sort of like 90s English rom-coms. So like Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill. And I was like, you know what? I did some test grades from the day before, and I was like, you know what? Flash is really hitting in this room with a sort of like brown bass tone. That's going to work really well for this morning. And I was like, although it might sort of like mean in 20 years time, those don't necessarily resonate as much. I'm shooting a mix, so we can have shots they really enjoy for now, and stuff that they'll still have that's really elegant for when they look back on them, that's kind of stand the test of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, was that in the Cairngorms where you were using your flash, right?
Do you know Mar Lodge?
Have we been? I don't think we've been there, but I know of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of stag heads on the wall.
Is it?
Have we been there?
I'm trying to think if it's
The
one of
drives around that part of the world. I was blown away. I was sort of phoning my wife. I'm like, can we move here? Is there a way we can pull everyone out of school and just schlap up here?
Yeah. On a nice day, that area of the country's incredible just to drive around.
Yeah. And we were doing portraits between the church and the final venue, and had to sort of like drop some Google pins and just take note of various things. It's a big front facade. I think it's burnt down a few times.
Oh, really? Oh. There's a lot of wedding venues in Scotland that have just burnt down. Holy shit, that is some hall with the stag's heads.
Yeah, that's where they have the dinner and the dancing. So it's
fucking hell. It's like a room of death.
It's most of the. I noticed the names below each of the stag heads on the lower level, and it was basically the two sons having a field day at various ages.
Oh my god! Jeez, fair enough.
So, like a lot of your work's destination, so you're maybe over in Italy or something. How do you balance your portfolio with Cairngorms versus Italy versus London? Like, how do you?
It's definitely a challenge and a split, and it's about being intentional with what you put out. I have two booklets. I have a European one and I have a UK one, and they're definitely look and feel differences. And I'd say even within sections of Italy, you have quite different flora, fauna, and light. And I think it's the same in the UK. Like Scottish light is super different, actually pretty close to Cornish light. Whereas Cotswolds and sort of London's like obviously a totally different thing altogether, and the way people approach London stuff is quite different. But I generally in that situation lean in on how am I going to bespoke this out? How am I going to make it feel right? I mood board really hard, and I come in with an approach for each day. Just that I have my backgrounds and my phone. It splits into the 4 parts of the day, and I just flip between them. And I've got like an image set vertically on my iPhone that I've made for like morning sort of ceremony, reception, and then nighttime. And there's stuff I'm going for. And I would say that as I shoot a lot of film, I'd say film is like quite helpful as a bit of a truth. And film stocks respond much more consistently than say digital sensors do to various light. So I do think that sometimes just shooting some, I call them plates because I'm used to it. I'll shoot some plates of various things, and then it means I have like quite a helpful truth grade to start with. And I don't have presets. I don't work like that. I definitely like tackle everything individually.
Mm-hmm. For those who don't do commercial work, what are plates?
So plates are when you shoot a clean image of somewhere where you get a bit of sky, you get the building, you get a bit of a plant. You just get like a sense of colors within that context.
Yeah. Okay.
The true plate is when you shoot something without someone in it, just to get the background. But this is like my version of a plate is just I want a bit of all the colors. So I can see how they render on film, and then that motivates what I'm doing digitally. Yeah.
Actually, that's one thing that annoys me about people that are selling presets or you know, companies that have got this preset feature. It's like they'll pick a still that just you cannot relate your work to it because it's such a particular, like it's indoor and there's red lights. I'm like, how am I supposed to compare this preset to something if I don't have like a plate or a series of images which have all the colors in it so you can compare? It's just, I don't know. That was a random thought, but
I think black and white ones probably are where it's at, but profiles are definitely, I don't know if you come across a wonderful guy called Tom Wright.
Yeah.
He's a good pal, but he definitely is a strong believer in profiles rather than presets. And I think that ballpark, you're just changing the brain of like post-processing software rather than saying this is going to work out because I bought someone's presets I liked. It's a nice way of supporting someone with absolutely no benefit to you.
Yeah. Man, I remember. Do you remember Clubhouse days? That's where I was introduced to Tom.
Yeah.
He was always on Clubhouse. Good guy. Very knowledgeable. I do want him on the podcast. Just, yeah.
He's got a microphone, so you've been a much better spot.
Yes. I definitely want him on the podcast.
Right, that's it. We'll get him on instead.
It's all the gear, no idea. But no, in his sense, he has all the gear and many ideas.
Ideas, yeah.
We talk, I did one of his courses and we talk pretty regularly, and we not so much troubleshoot, but we talk about how things render a lot and get mad dorky about colors sometimes. And this isn't stuff that couples really ever experience in me, but I really enjoy the technical language of things and colors, like digging them out, making them work. And I generally can be dropped into the wrong color and rip it to the right place. And it's like I came from being very craft heavy with that. Partly because when I started, I was on a Nikon D90 shooting live music, and I was like, this isn't built to work. So this doesn't work out. So I got really good at retouching because my equipment was just absolute sort of like garbage can material in the worst scenario for it.
Hey, I'm Ashley from With Jack. I'm one of the sponsors of the Perspective podcast. With Jack helps to keep photographers in business by supporting them financially and legally if they have problems with a client or they make a mistake in their work. We've all had that fear of our CF card or our hard drive failing and losing important photos. You can find out more at withjack.co.uk. Head over there and find out how we can help you be a confident creative.
That's probably a good segue, actually, into talking about gear. There's a few individuals who have been excited about our talk with you, Daniel, specifically because, and I couldn't believe it, they wanted to know all about your gear, which is, I mean,
where did you find these people?
Before we talk about like specific equipment, why film? Like, why did you choose to shoot film at weddings?
To be honest, and definitely couples that have spoken to me recently, I have quite like a gently cynical viewpoint on it, despite the fact it's something I'm known better for. And I definitely have like a radar for when it's not needed at all. So it's part of my workflow. It's not the whole workflow. That's just like the first thing to caveat, rather than me being like out and out, we just do this. If someone put a gun to my head and say, shoot 30 rolls and don't touch the digital camera, we're fine. We can do it. Again, going back to my like dorky color stuff, I actually think the biggest breaker in the chain right now is labs. And there's quite a lot of variability, and you can send 9 jobs and get good results and have one job that's not great. And that's still a wedding. So it's why I'm putting a tiny bit less emphasis on it. Okay. And I'm doing more scanning at home, but appreciate in a season, you can't just be doing that. You don't have time. It's more of like a portfolio thing at the end of the year. But why film? Sorry, jumping back. I'm not a politician. I'm not avoiding questions. The first thing I almost touched on earlier is it's a really good ballpark for color. Because I think the colors are typically, especially if you get to know a film well, you get a really good sort of feel for what it's going to behave like. I also like looking through older viewfinders, and obviously digital cameras are quite homogenous in how their viewfinders are set up, whereas the olden days ones, some just give you a different viewpoint and give you a bit of magic. Might be yellowed out with some radioactive lead that you're probably not meant to put near your face. It just sometimes gives you like a different viewpoint into quite a normal looking scene and just makes something spark in you. So it's weirdly, sometimes it's the user experience rather than the actual film. And other times it's straight out, this is going to behave more interestingly than what I can do with a mirrorless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, full on gear talk. What's in your camera bag? And what isn't in your camera bag?
I've got a few pals in this who would laugh their way through hearing me talk about cameras because they've moved a fair bit in the last 2 years. And let's say the books have been offset for definitely 2 years ago. And we're a bit more stable now. And that definitely that came from Tom as well. I definitely stabled out things.
Tell us all about it.
So obviously it's a bit of an armory, given how much build up you can. I've got, what have we got right now? We've got a Makina 6.7, which is the medium format. It's a big boy. It's bellowed, so they're a little bit delicate. It's an 80mm on 6.7, which I think's roughly, I think you got to times it by 0.67, and then you'll know better than I do. That's very much like a portrait camera. It's a bit of a beast to rock around, but all 6.7s kind of are, and it's probably the least painful because it collapses down to sort of like a palatable chunk. I've got a Rolleiflex that I use for UK weddings only because I just think, again, like going into that being specific about what we're doing, I just think it suits the sort of eccentricity and whimsical aspect of a lot of the countryside and Scottish ones I do. It's a bit more intimate because you have close focus. Doesn't work so well in Italy because it doesn't like heat and starts to behave weird. Right. Then I've got a Nikon F6, which is a bit of a workhorse. I could throw it into the ground and the ground would break it, not it. It's almost sort of like switching the brain off and just going, if we're just handling this scene, this will do a great job. And when I'm sort of mentoring or doing any education, I put a lot of people on the F100, which is like the baby sister of it. Yeah. And that F100 is 99% of what that one does. I just wanted to spend $1,000 on it rather than 200 quid on it because I'm an idiot. Then there's a Leica MP, which is a bit going back to the documentary sort of aspect to weddings. Just gives me like a really clear viewpoint for receptions, and I really like it. Sometimes it bleeds into other parts of the day, but that's definitely like my reception film camera. I think that's the film cameras now. Okay, and then digital, I've got a Leica M11P, which takes the same lenses as the film body. Yeah. And I've got 28 that's pretty much glued to it. And then I've got a 28 on the other one too. The issue is I typically need the same lens twice a lot.
Yeah, okay. That was actually is the 28 a recent addition?
So last year I was shooting medium format digital at weddings and was on a zoom and a 55, and that was like, it was brilliant, but it was just overkill and crazy, and pick time was breaking, and I had to speak to them directly about how to handle the fact I was putting up. I was having to compress files just to fit them within the actual software because they were over 10,000 pixels, and you can't actually upload files that are over 10,000 pixels. So we had to dumb that down a bit. And then chatted to Tom. I still 28. It came out in need of, the rooms are sometimes just needing a little bit more context. And I kind of feel like with the way cameras are now, you're typically getting more resolution than you need. So 28 is like a 35 with crop room. That's how I think about it.
Okay. And so are you cropping that in post then?
Once you've not. It just gives me enough room in rooms that maybe look slightly like too tight on a 35, and I found it I haven't really touched my 35 since going to 28.
Yeah. One of our listeners specifically wanted to ask you about the 28 because did you first try it in Italy? Is that?
God, that is very specific.
I know.
I pretty much used a 28 all of the off season. Okay. The first one, the last bit of kit that I didn't mention is I got two Nikon bodies that sometimes one comes out, sometimes two come out.
Yeah.
And that's like the fast boy, the Leica's the slow boy. But 28, I can end up having 28 on 3 cameras at any point. So
Jesus
I
Christ,
did a
okay.
triple whammy the other day, and it felt good. And sometimes it just means I'm forced to like jump into situations and be a bit Daniel Kim about stuff. Not that I am hitting his levels, but we're working on it. But I think 28, first time I used it properly was some off-season ones this year. And I genuinely think it's just having a bit more breadth in a room that sometimes they're tight. Sometimes it's the fact they look better when you get the ceiling, the floor, and then the scene that you've put in front of you. And especially think because a lot of the work I'm doing is portrait rather than landscape. And I feel that when I'm delivering galleries, as I'm seeing like a little bit more of a higher ratio of portraits, I just like the way it feels.
Yeah. Could you give like, do you have a ratio of landscape versus vertical, like a rough kind of percentage in your head?
Probably like
that you shoot
70%, maybe
70%.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think like sparked that? Is it Instagramification of everything, or is that just how you like to see
I do
images?
think that a lot of my couples are from creative fields, so the end goal often is a 5x4 frame or whatever Meta's decided to champion this month, because it does seem to shift a bit. I definitely shoot 5.4 because it's not widely different to if you went 4.5. It's so marginal.
Yeah.
Definitely doing a full year on 4.3 last year was really like interesting. So I've just felt like images presented they just felt a bit more interesting to me, and they felt more intentional when I was shooting for 4.3. So yeah, as you can kind of hear, I'm never like miles off being landscape, and I'm never miles off being portrait, just on the fact that I pretty much crop everything to 5.4 or 4.3 now.
Yeah.
Okay. Just out of pure curiosity, what cameras would you go for certain moments of a wedding? Like, why do you even have that many bodies on you for the layman out there? Like,
are you taking all them to a wedding, or is it just you pick and choose per wedding?
So I definitely, again, I'm particular, and things come out to play on days that specifically work for them. Ironically, sometimes more comes out to destination than back home, even though it's always stressful bringing too much stuff, especially with it's just like you're just killing yourself through travel, right? The F6 is always there. That's my 35 body. It's just a ride or die sort of situation. One Nikon is always on my right hip. The F6 is always on my left hip. And then sometimes I have 2 Leicas down the middle. And then sometimes I just have the digital one down the middle, because I've got 35 slow digital and then a fast digital, if that makes sense. So yeah, sometimes I'll vary from 3 to 5 on me at any given point. And portraits, I'll chuck the 6-7 in the bag. So I have like a sling bag behind me that has 2 lenses and then the Makina in it.
Okay. And when you go about your wedding, are you carrying all these bodies on you at the one time?
Yeah, I generally, I would say, having gone from the GFX and a Contact 645 last year, I feel like I got the better deal this year. It sounds like I'm causing back issues, but actually last year was way, way tougher, because I still insisted on having like 4 or 5 things on me. Whereas this time I'm it feels a bit more gentle. I just think of them as different paintbrushes. They all do something different. They all see stuff slightly differently, and I use them all slightly differently. And it's just having the right tool for the right moment. And I think you were touching on that as when do you use them?
Yeah.
I've got awful ADHD, and genuinely sometimes it's about when something looks right, and there's like I have a real clarity over that looks right, that looks inspiring through that. And when I'm on the Nikon Z stuff, I'm not I'm not putting the camera to my eye particularly. I'm using the back of the screen, and I'm feeling real Gen Z about how I'm moving through the world. And when I'm on the Leica, I'm typically putting that to my face, and I'm never using the screen. There's a real different flow between those. I had to get really used to my film SLR because I didn't like having to put my eye to it, because the Nikon should be my screen one, but then I'm looking at the back and it's like a wall. But yeah, I definitely think it's nice to have a camera that you can just literally square up, and then it's nice to have things that you have to like properly frame out.
Yeah.
So for likes of those one-off moments, like confetti tunnel or something, what would you default to? Like what that's about to happen?
That one's and I'm going to reference him more because I just love him and he's a brilliant human. But Tom and I generally at one point were talking about me having nothing fast or mirrorless on me. And I kept on being like, but there's 2 moments in a day where you just can't mess it up. And that's like someone leaving the ceremony, because that's always fast and furious and you're always in a tight space. And then confetti is always kind of nuts. And it's the only time of the day I change my frame rate. So I'll just chuck it up to 5 or 6 frames per second. I don't use the full width of what any of the cameras can do. And I generally I cherry pick them off a little bit, and I try and set back further than I previously had. So I try and frame for the context now rather than being tight in, because I know if I had to, I can get a crop of it anyway.
Yeah. 2 very similar moments, I had to say. Leaving the ceremony and then
those two that are kind of like, I need a little bit more for my equipment. That's it.
Yeah. Is that just because the couple are charging right at you?
Just rinsing it at me. They're Usain Bolting, and I'll sometimes say to them, hey, just take that walk slow. And when you're in it, you just do what you do.
Listeners, you remember in the last episode where I reminded Greg that his laptop wasn't plugged in? Well, he just made a mad dash because again it wasn't plugged in, and it seems to be.
I was charging my battery.
I'm making you guys look like real amateurs right now with my background. Look how consistent that is. It's not moved once.
That's right. Yeah. TV's not switching off because you don't have a TV. Your Mac's still running. I mean, what are we doing? Honestly.
Headphones. My double laptop energy. You can't even. I don't even have a laptop. Look, I'm just a face.
That's right. Branded mugs. You see this? Honestly, it's the only things that don't break here.
Tax ain't writing itself off.
One other question that I had from our community was how you edit your scans, which you said you do. So, talk to us about how you edit your scans.
So I use one lab that take it a bit of the distance. They're well known. A lot of my peers use them too. They're based out in Spain, called Carmen Zeta. And they have a process that's a lot more loved up and hands-on. You end up with a specific scanner that you work with, as in like a human rather than a Epson.
Okay.
And then you kind of feed back in color tones or reference points. And obviously that's a bit counterintuitive to what I mentioned earlier about film being my plate. So I don't want to send my digital as the reference. I'll send something that I feel looks like, it's often I'll send over my mood board, and they'll nail it sometimes. And that's great. And their process is so that you have less to do on the back end, and it's just color and it's sometimes white balance and contrast. And when I'm self-scanning, that's when a bit more magic happens, and I'm much more directly over it. And whereas a lot of people use Negative Lab Pro, I've found it to be like overly sharp and a little bit inconsistent. I've been using this software called Smart Convert, and I really rate it. I think it's brilliant. It's a bit of a learning curve initially, but I actually think you get really, really interesting. It's almost like having a Frontier scanner at home, which is helpful for me because I like more characterful colors. I like a little bit more interest and texture coming from film, and I think there's like they've built a really beautiful way of interpreting sort of negative scans.
Yeah.
And if I use UK labs, a lot of them are Nuritsus, and then I've built an actual conversion preset. And I did that over sort of like 10 weddings where I just tried to match the film file to the digital, and I had a little play with it. And I was like, oh, this is how the frontier behaves. I'm going to change it up. And I sent that to a few of my like education clients, and I think it's been quite successful. So you just got to really learn how scanners work and what their colors are and how they, not to personify them too hard, but they have individuality and they have like characteristics that are really specific. I tell mentees that Nuritsus are sort of like getting a raw scan back, and Frontiers are like getting a baked in grade. And if you're using a Frontier, you better know what your film stock does when it's handled by that. And you have to be intentional with it. And some people are just like all about the vibe, and that's fine too. And they'll sort of walk blindly and the work will still be really appealing. And some people will get more meticulous about it and maybe be able to push that process on further. But the big breaker for me is that if you have any inconsistency in the lab, the whole thing goes out the window anyway. Which is why, again, I said how I'm less reliant on film now to bring my work forward. And I worked really hard on my digital colors to make them feel filmy.
Yeah.
And that's definitely clear to see. So if you go through your portfolio,
when you say you like to self-scan, but you obviously send them off to the lab sometimes, what are you choosing certain weddings that you're like, I know I'll be wanting to share these, so I'm going to do them? Or is it like at the end of the season, you'll maybe go back and self-scan them yourself?
So this year, definitely, I went back and self-scanned a few keyframes. And I went and data and printed some keyframes as well. So I wanted to get a feel for some different options for end products for couples. And I do them as gifts often. And I get excited in the dark room, and I'll just go off on a mad one and print like 3 or 4 copies of the same image. And it means I can pass stuff on.
Yeah. Sorry, that is that alarm is on our end. It's Wednesday here in the office, and they like to
let people know when we're recording. Wednesday at 11.
That's right, Wednesday at 11.
Is this a one taker, or can you cut around it?
Oh, I just leave it all in. It's too much work to cut everything.
Yeah, man, I get that.
I used to cut out all the ums and ahs.
Yeah.
Got too much to do now.
I think my swear pot is pretty low for me, so I'm kind of glad for that. My mum can actually watch this and not feel ashamed.
It's all right. It's all right. So, I'm sure your mum will forgive you for a couple of swear words. It's fine. Don't worry.
The scanning stuff's really it doesn't take that long, and it's really quick to get a feel for it. And I was really pleased with how like consistent it was with what I'd learned in the darkroom printing. There's definitely like it's a whole new area of color to sort of learn. If you haven't done darkroom stuff, it's really helpful to do that first before you start scanning at home with various softwares, because the behavior is quite similar to when you're printing. Especially in Smart Convert, it's really technically similar. And you're dealing with like interrelations between 2 colors 3 times. So you've got like 6 decisions each time, but you get really quick. And then once you've got it nailed, you can kind of batch process.
Yeah. For those people who just don't bother with what kind of cameras or processing, they're like, oh my God, nerds.
Honestly, like you can chameleon to whoever you're talking to. And I honestly have so much respect for people who are field photographers and just like see it, shoot it, move on. And I've had really like helpful conversations with people over the years where genuinely like none of this stuff's like none of the gear stuff really matters. It all kind of does the same stuff. None of the film cameras really matter because they're really personal in how you like integrate with them. The issue is troubleshooting and how you dig yourself out of a situation. And field photographers, if something goes wrong with the camera, you thankfully a wedding practice often is to have a second. So 90% of the time you can just crack on. But I personally find it really helpful knowing stuff inside out, so that when I do have those situations, I don't flap and I just continue on, and then I revive it when I need to.
Yeah. Let's move on. Oh, actually, I do have a little thing from one of our community, and it was on a Q&A that you mentioned the Canon EOS film cameras being entry level. You triggered one of our listeners, Daniel. So do you want to clarify a little bit
I'm never
more
here
about
to
that?
ruin anyone's day. I actually you got to think about the fact I used to shoot studio shoots, like I'd shoot 60, 70 rolls on a day. So from that perspective, yeah, they kind of are. If you're using medium format and you're taking it into the darkroom to then print it, that's a really different journey than if you're putting a Canon 1V in AV mode with a bit of exposure comp and shooting 8 frames a second at your whim, and then it's auto rewinding. It's a very different thing. But there are so many cameras that are more entry, but none of this stuff matters hugely. They're just boxes that you put a lens on.
Yeah,
they're plastic. They're from the 90s. Give me a break.
I mean, people who are shooting digital, like Sony, the A9 IIIs that can shoot like 120 raw files in a single second, like those are toys. Those are full on. You're just
It's
anyway,
really about how much you want to cull, and just to make that person feel better. I generally to people I've done education with, the F100 and the 1V are like the first thing I ask people to root out. I tell them to skip the EOS 3s and the 5s because they have battery connection issues, and then you're just stumped. And you can have with mirror lockups when you have disconnects in cold weather or hot weather. But the 1V, I'll tell a mentee while they're easing into film and making it part of their workflow, put it in AV mode, hack the ISO to half what the box speed says, and on you go. Treat it like a Canon D Mark IV and you're good. So it is a really like simplified workflow point. So maybe they read what I said slightly wrong. Simplified rather than basic.
Maybe.
So let's talk about your mood boards, because you've mentioned them a few times that you create mood boards for weddings. Is that process collaborative between you and the client? Like, tell us a bit more about how that works.
It's really specific and nuanced. So I make one for me because I've got goals and things I'm thinking about and things I'm excited about and things I've seen on the recce that have sort of sparked something. I appreciate I'm talking a lot about this sparking something. I move the world being sort of like picking up on stuff and responding to stuff. And that's why I go down the day before just to kind of earmark stuff that's caught my eye. And you might never go there on the day, but 9 times out of 10, you kind of will roll through some of these situations. But mood boards, sometimes I get sent really comprehensive stuff by brides, even at inquiry point. And they'll be like, this is our mood board. And I'll be like, I totally get why you've reached out to me. And sometimes I'll get mood boards and I'm like, not your guy. That doesn't align all stylistically. But I'll talk to them about it in a really like gentle way. And I'll be like, hey, these people would be amazing for you. And they are similar price. They are phenomenal. And if I was getting married again, I would probably use these people. So I try and be really nurturing to people who are inquiring with that sort of like creative sort of intention. And if I see a disjoint between what I do and what they're looking for, I don't progress it and I really help them towards the right sort of place, because most couples aren't commissioners of photography often. Some are, some absolutely aren't, and that's cool. But then, when it gets into sort of like the actual, we're a year out, not typically mood boarding a year out, we're talking about design choices, and we might talk about things that are nothing to do with photography and how those elements come together and what might look good. And I'll send them rental companies. I'll send them various things they could buy that might work for a table setting if the planners aren't doing it. We'll talk about fashion really heavily, and we'll definitely mood board fashion sometimes. And I'll send them like 5 or 6 styles that I think could really work for them. And I'm very, very specific about dresses. Like a dress can really make or break how I feel about a wedding. and I don't know whether that comes across in my work, but I definitely feel it. I'm really tuned in on, I want to be talking to a bride about a dress pre them going shopping. Let's talk about what suits, what you're into. And then I'm going to show you stuff that sort of might amplify down that route and give you a little bit more like variance within that space. So yeah, I really enjoy that's pre any cameras being put in my hand. It's almost weird for people when you've spoken to them for a year and a half, and you haven't had a camera in your hand, and then suddenly you rock up with 7 or 8 Canons ready to take things on. But yeah, I have a process of on the wedding day morning, I make my final mood board, and that's the one that becomes my iPhone background. I don't know if let me see if I can show you how it works. It's deciding to play ball, so let's roll with this. Do you see here? So I'll set up different sections of the day. So I'll make my mood board in Keynote, chuck it into my phone, screenshot, and I custom the layout so that they're vertical, not horizontal. And then it just gives me, especially someone who has like very short attention moments, just the way my brain works, it's like a really great way of quickly anchoring myself.
Yeah, it's a good hack, because I know, us included, a lot of people will put the timeline on their phone screen, but it's a bit different. I don't think I've heard of anybody putting a mood board on the home screen.
No. I have, the
ones that ask more clear questions, just get them out.
No, it's not the gear question. It was more, I
was wondering if you've been to a dress shop with a couple before.
No, but what's awesome is because I have WhatsApp groups with almost every couple, I always have this moment where I get a message from that number away from the groom, and I just get like a photo dump of 25 images, and it will be like, oh, I'm the maid of honor, like she just wanted me to send these through, like any of these like feeling right, we really have a good feeling about this one. I was like, this is great, I feel like you should also go to this shop and just get a feeling of how that style might work in that brand. Because bridal designers always design for certain heights, often built around either the lead designer's height themselves, and you just see like really that you don't know the stuff till you go shopping, and something you fall in love with might just not work. And then I've started to build a bit of a repertoire of certain heights and brands that design for that shape, and you definitely see stuff and you get a really clear vibe for it, and you can see how someone can go from looking like red carpet Hollywood levels of themselves through to someone who just like where it's a bit of a nothing dress, and you just see so much range, and there's stuff that just really suits people. And it's just like, for me, it's a big payoff when you lead someone to make like a killer dress choice and they're super happy and feel really comfortable in it, but also they look like a total movie star.
Yeah. There's a couple of commissioned projects on your website which I enjoyed going through, and I don't know if this is true, but I really did get that kind of passion for dresses in those in a number of images actually. And I think later on we've got a show and tell section where I'm pretty sure I've picked one of those images where you've spent a good amount of time just working on the flow of the dress over some stairs. But we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, that's all.
Have you ever, so you've got your mood board on your phone, you've been to locations, have you ever gone to a location on the day with your couple and something's gone like wrong and you've kind of had to like fake confidence, I suppose, like you know you've taken them here and you're like, shit, this isn't going to work now because whatever, a camera fall or the lighting's changed? Like, what would you do in that scenario?
So normally I discuss about having the rehearsal at the same time as the ceremony on the day before. And where possible, that always makes a lot of sense. Typically you're able to check in at destination places in the afternoon when, like most destination weddings in Italy or Spain, you're talking like 4 or 5 p.m. ceremonies. So there's if you're let in the day before to check in, you're pretty certain that you can do your rehearsal at your ceremony time. And you get a really good read of light. If I'm with Louis, who sometimes regularly works with me as a filmmaker, we sun-seeker stuff and we get a little feel. And the biggest, I'm pretty good on my feet. I think you've got to be flexible. You've got to be creative enough to come up with different ways in. And most of really brilliant wedding image making is about being quick on your feet and flexible and not just going hell for leather on one corner of one room. And that was a real thing from the commercial days when you'd see like a young DP just getting way too excited about the corner of a situation and just like spending a bit too much time on it. And I was like, we need to get the skeleton of this down. We need to stop hyper focalizing on how nice that corner looks, because it's okay. It's okay. It's not the whole thing. And you've got to move through a venue doing that, picking up on stuff. And my portrait sessions are, I was very lucky to build a friendship early on in my wedding stuff with a guy called Benjamin Wheeler. And he was all about getting people moving. And I definitely think there are weddings where it's about the people, and there's definitely weddings about the people plus the context. And especially when you're working through your earlier years, you don't often get a context that's really beautiful, but the people remain the beautiful part. So if I turn up somewhere and I don't see anything, I've got to check myself whether I'm well and whether I'm having an okay day, and guns are firing on all cylinders. But I always go people first, then I put them in the context. So if I can tell a love story or tell a wedding day through the people, you guaranteed to have those two people getting married, thankfully, on a wedding, and then take a further step back. How can I embellish that through where we are? And how can I tell the story of where they chose to put this important day? And you do move around it, and light is the thing. And I'm definitely this year adding that to every single decision. And people say sunsets at 8, and I'm like, well, the hills around here make the sun go at 6. But then I look where that is, and it's mid starters, and you're just like, I'll tee them up, and I'll say in the morning, I was like, hey, yesterday I really noticed the sun went behind the hills at 6. As soon as you're done with the starters, could we just go for a quick 5 minutes? And like, you just play you play to the strengths. You set people up with an expectation, and you flow within the flow of the day. And I generally think that means you can troubleshoot and help things on, even if things are at any point going slightly off piste. I'm not sure if that was 100% your question, but hopefully that added to it.
I mean, what you said was amazing. I suppose in your communications, your WhatsApp groups, your pre-communications and all that kind of stuff, that all builds into your ability to actually do that with your couple. And I think maybe a lot of photographers don't, they make the booking, and then it's maybe 1 or 2 emails, and then they rock up, and then they have these expectations of being able to do that. And I don't think, I often don't think that works out very well. No. When you're surprising a couple with that sort of idea, because you're letting them know, oh, by the way, the sun went behind the hills, and I there's no like, you don't seem very professional when you rock up and you don't have that kind of relationship built in. You seem very unprofessional if it's just like, I didn't notice this before. Can we do this? That's not a good vibe. But if you're talking to all your brides and grooms and building that in, you can do that, and it doesn't look unprofessional.
I'd say the biggest unlock there is even if you've got a planner and you've got a full timeline for them, I always go through and I do my take on it. I always and although it creates like extra back and forth sometimes, I actually, in the spirit of, you keep it friendly and you just say, hey, just from experience, I think this flow is going to work better. I can see this not working. And I think even over like 4 or 5 years, I really switched up where I put the portraits in the day, and I've really flipped up where I put the family stuff in the day. Because there's some crucial stuff that, like, I had a Tuscany wedding mid-May, and we had a weather day. It rained. And really fortunately for me, and it obviously was I'd say it was about 7/8 of the work, the couple were just rolling with it. And they were such a vibe, and they were the perfect couple to deal with what they were going through. And he just came up to me and was like, I trust you, Dan. When you think it's time for family portraits, let's go and we'll make it happen. I was like, this is literally the biggest gift because I can just manipulate the next 2 hours with what I've got. And I felt like sometimes you just get really lucky and people are just down for that. And some days you just lose. And I had one wedding where it just rained the whole way through. And it's July and it was really tough. And you just end up making the absolute best of it. And that's all you just know you got to be a caring, big cuddle of a human, get them through that and some of the disappointment they might feel and some of the expectation shifts. And so I have 2 kids and I spend the whole time like with my wife setting expectations of what's about to happen. And that I genuinely think weddings are the same. You're looking after 2 people who are like feeling everything. They're in a really intense day and you generally just like carrying them through stuff.
We're going to interrupt this podcast to bring you an advertisement for PickTime. Our buddies at PickTime, we love PickTime. If you want to elevate your business, PickTime's maybe the way to do it.
It's an online gallery delivery service.
It's a really good looking one, which is initially how we got into the service. It just looks better than all the other kind of platforms that we personally use.
Yeah. We've over time got to know the owners, got to know the people behind it. Lovely people, great support system there as well.
There's just so many tools at your fingertips with PickTime, but the marketing and the blogs and the slideshow features.
Yeah, there's so much more than just a gallery delivery service. You've got all those things that Simon was talking about. You can create your own blog from it. You can create slideshows. One new feature that I really love is the vendor network. It's where you can use AI to curate a gallery for a specific supplier. So you could use AI to gather all the photos of the flowers and send them to the florist and they would have that gallery specific just for them.
It's kind of a mind-blowing feature.
Yeah.
And we might as well be taking advantage of AI before the uprising and it starts taking advantage of us. So let's just all bear that in mind.
Yeah, and not to mention the built-in store, and that way you can just make more money while also having a nice, aesthetically pretty gallery.
Yeah. And if you want to sign up today, you can get a free month if you use Perspective at checkout.
Yeah.
So if you want to test out for free for a month, go for it.
Take your business to the next level with PickTime.
I do wonder if there's anything that you do as a like a creative individual that maybe another photographer wouldn't dare try at a wedding.
I've got an interesting one next year where we're going to take an hour break to set up a big scene. Which is quite fun. And then I've got one next year where they blew me away on this first call, and I was like, this is gonna be unreal. And they've basically just taken what they would have put into a wedding venue and put it into a village hall, and they were like, we're gonna get a production designer in, and we're gonna spend what we would have spent on this and do it here. And I was like, that's and I'm effectively helping them team up with the right broader team so they get the florals right, so they get the production design right, and it's like I was like, this is amazing. So me slapping cinema lights along to a venue next year is going to be, I'd say, probably a bit unique. And in those situations, I typically use motion picture film on bigger studio cameras. So I'm bringing it down a totally different sort of, what are they called? Pelly case of stuff just for that part of the day. I find destination versions of that quite hard. That shoot that you referred to briefly earlier that we did in France, like getting to know the local hire companies religiously through that experience, like then it's never easy. You're always starting from square one with these places. And it is a lot more prep. But I'd say that in terms of stuff that I do that other people wouldn't dream of, those are, one of those was an example of an interesting type of booking. The other one is splitting a day, because they just said, hey, we're going to be really tired midway through our day, but I want to do something that's a bit interesting and a bit elevated. I wouldn't say I'm like, I feel like there's I think it's probably just like the actual the investment in the front end. I'd say that's where I'm more specific. I don't think I'm unique. I think there are people who do stuff that I do.
When you say investment in the front end,
just
you mean your investment in time.
Yeah, big time investments in the building, because it just means that I listened to a brilliant podcast by Daniel Kim, Second Mention, and he was.
I was going to say, you've mentioned him already.
But he has this an ethos that I feel really tied to, and it almost clarified how I moved through a wedding day, hearing him say the words. And he was like, it's all about being let in. He was like, there's an art of being let in. And once you're in, those images would change. So your proximity to the inner party of the wedding and the friends that surround the couple totally elevate your imagery and totally enable a different viewpoint. It's almost like going from being a photographer in the crowd to being a photographer on the stage with someone. And therefore, I've really found that the more love I give couples, and I generally end up being friends with like a really decent number of the couples that I work with. And that's like, for me, that's a really lovely aspect of it. And one of the reasons I enjoy it so much. And it's not always the case, but you definitely have ones you're looking forward to over the year where you've had much more dialogue, and those weddings just kick different. It became a part of my process through learning that.
Yeah. So when you did learn that and like discover like being let in can change the images, was that like a turning point where you finally sort of discovered your voice and your place in what's quite a saturated market, the wedding photography thing?
Again, you're hiring a person, and it's why I almost said like the camera's a total like fun background chat, and it is just noise. You've got to handle the day as a person first, and then as a photographer second. And I think that just changes the photos, and it totally elevates what you can give someone. And I always get feedback that it looks like people are at ease during their portraits. And every single couple, with almost like, I'd say like anyone who hasn't been a model, anyone who hasn't got a career in that world goes, hey, I feel super uncomfortable in front of the camera. And I go, that's why I recce, and I take you for a walk. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. I'm just going to get you to focus on your person, part one. And then I'm going to take you for a wander together. And that's it. Keep it really loose. But as I've chosen where I'm walking them through, and I take them on a route that I've planned, it's all smokes and mirrors. For them, they're just hanging out for 10 minutes and having a nice minute away from a massive crowd, but they're not away for so long they miss their wedding. And it's kept really light.
Yeah. What's going through it? So they're relaxed. What's going through your brain?
I keep it light too. I'm always very attentive to how they're feeling. And I try and really be compassionate to how they might be feeling. And it is, again, like an ADHD trait where you're really perceptive over changes. So I really honor how they are at that moment. I'll totally flip the timeline if I see someone's like just needing some more time. Or if they're just speaking to someone that's really key at a wedding, I'm not pulling them out of the crowd. I'm really specific about when I engage to go do something. And I think flexibility and knowing your timeline well, but also just like knowing what you're roughly doing and where the light is really, really key.
Yeah. Do you think your ADHD has given you a greater sense, like almost like a superpower for like empathy?
Yeah, you never, there's an element of you're aware of what someone else is going through, but you don't necessarily have to voice anything. So you just sort of, you make adjustments. And I just find it's like I think I previously just said that they're really, you see a lot of the humanity in people on weddings. And like, for me, I'm much better creative when I'm being perceptive to how people are feeling. And it's way more visually interesting. And like, whereas maybe a year or two ago, I'd be scared to get too in there when someone's feeling quite upset or emotional. Like I'd now, having sort of like broader reference point, I'm aware of how to shoot that now without making it feel like they're on the spot or being photographed. I shoot from the hip in that moment on a 28. I don't put the camera to my face. I focus. I literally zone focus situations, and it doesn't. I might snap one frame, and I move the hell on. Like I understand the role of that image later on, and I try and make it as non-offensive in the moment.
Yeah, it's a nice balance, because obviously maybe at the earlier part of our conversation when you mentioned storyboarding and frame grabbing, that is quite technical work. Someone might think, oh, that's where their strength is. They have to storyboard because they have a lacking in all these other skills, which might be the case, but not with you. Might be the case with other creators. But it's nice to hear that you don't just rely on that pre-production work. You are attentive to other people, and you understand vibes and feelings. And I think that's,
you have to ballpark stuff.
Powerful.
I ballpark the image, like the imagery references. I'm like, this is roughly where it's going to feel like and where I think it's going to land. And that's almost like just the pre-intention done. And I'm really organized before the day. But on the day, I want to be loose and free and just aware of you just, as you said, curveballs happen, interesting stuff happens, things run late.
Yeah.
Like things just shape differently and present differently, and you just can't be too premeditated with anything. So yeah, it's a type A build up and then a type B approach.
Yeah. Yeah, because I do think a lot of people struggle with either one of those aspects, and they make up with the other. That's quite cool. I do want to talk about your pricing and what you offer, because I think, like you said, that investment that you give up front of your time is very valuable. So I want to hear what price range you start at. I mean, obviously this will depend on what sort of weddings you do, because not all weddings are one-day events. I'm assuming you do, say a France or Italy wedding, and it's like 3 days or something. So break us down those kind of prices, and then what people actually get from you. Obviously, your pick time gallery.
Don't worry about it.
But yeah,
I was a bit starstruck. They followed me the other day and then started commenting on things, and I was like, "Hey guys, how are we doing?" About a year ago, I talked to you about 10,000 pixels, and now here we are, best friends. So pricing wise, obviously it's an ever moving target, and someone could listen to this in 2 years and it might not be relevant.
Sure.
But London, I have a pricing. UK, I have a pricing, and EU have a pricing. And just cutting a long story short, 90% of my EU work is Italy. It just is. Yeah. I find it actually quite financially different working in France and quite financially different working in Spain. I think the overheads are just a little bit higher, and in France's case, a lot higher. And I have to be
interesting.
So first and foremost, all of my pricing includes accommodation and travel and film and development. I've found psychologically it's much easier for a couple just to deal with, this is the cost. I've never really loved the sort of smorgasbord of add-ons. I've really got especially when I used to come from brand side and thinking about the way that a product is emotional for people and it's an investment. Just if you're buying something off the shelf, let's say in a camera store, right? It's always a bit frustrating when you spend another £600-700 on accessories. And I feel you want to try and keep things quite linear and progressive and positive. And therefore I like giving people, this is, I've made my booklet in a way that this suits 95% of people. And this only changes if you're getting bespoke about stuff and getting niche about anything or nuanced about anything. So for an EU 1 day, I'm currently 7,250, including the accommodation and travel. As soon as it's the welcome event on top, it's the 8,250. But I always travel out the day before the first thing happens. So
Yeah.
if it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm getting there on the Thursday. If it's a Saturday, Sunday, I get there on the Friday. And I try and take the first flight out knowing that there's a second flight, God forbid, anything gets a bit dodgy.
Yes.
And it's sometimes about anxiety around like suitcases not getting there or anything like that. Just having a little bit more time just to sort of get centered. It means I can attend all of the rehearsals. It means I can get FaceTime and touch points in. And I typically, if anyone's wanting to do flat lays, I'll do them the day before in a dead space of time, because I don't want that on the day. I just think it adds hours when you're already doing a big day.
We've seen a few photographers rock up with their little backdrops or whatever, and they have arrived before us, and we arrive early.
Yeah.
Just to do like drone shots or whatever, just to get them out of the way. But just watching them, and it can be like an hour or 2 hours of doing this.
Oh, I'm maybe not that, but I definitely, I'll bring it together quickly, and I'll add elements, and I keep adding elements until it feels right, and I'll play with height, and I'll play with depth, and that's why I don't want to be doing it in an actual live timeline. So most of my bookings for Europe typically are the welcome event and then the main day, and then pool parties. I always talk about couples about whether they are the right things to photograph. And I'll say, hey, let's limit it to an hour. Let's keep it short. Guests sometimes have party pretty hard, and European weddings typically go 3, 4 a.m. So start point for these things are often 2 p.m. going till 8. You have to be really specific about when you want to photograph that. And I obviously, sensibility of how people want to document their stuff is the first point. But I do just give gentle advice around, hey, someone might not want to be photographed when they're hanging, and in their sort of like in their swimwear. And typically, if I am photographing those events, I try and create scenes rather than like tights. I try and I'll do details. I'll do scenes of areas where they might be eating or hanging out or chilling. And then if there's anything sort of like swimwear, I'm very delicate about it. And I typically shoot from further back on a 50 to create like a contextual scene that looks like a landscape, like something they can hang in their home, and it like shows where they got married with a few dots in there that they know are their friends, but are just recognizable, but not.
Wait, sorry, I missed that word there. You do scenes rather than what?
Then sort of like anything, especially around sort of like pool scenes, I'll try and treat it like a Slim Aaron's reference, where I'm like doing a scene as if it's like a motion picture frame, or like a landscape image. So I'll shoot the landscape, and there just happen to be people in it that are all their best friends in the world.
Yep.
And I think those are what people print and put in their houses, rather than necessarily like, we're going to be in the water with people hanging out on a 35 mil. And then chucking it back to UK pricing, I have like it's 6,750 for full UK, and then it's 6,250 for London. And I've generally found like pricing wise, I'm always adapting stuff, because UK with Americans coming over for holidays in Scotland for like golf trips and various things, the hotels are pretty expensive. And if anything, they're on par with Italy. So I'm about to change things so that the EU rate and the UK rate are going to match each other going forward. And it's just going to be London that has that 6 start point, and the rest is all going to be 7 and up.
Yeah. And you don't, so obviously you mentioned your disdain of all the add-ons. Do you have any add-ons?
I give people the option to, at cost price, add film rolls beyond what I've suggested. So a wedding day naturally lands about 8 to 10 rolls for me, if I'm just doing a complimentary coverage on film to what I'm doing digitally. And I think hopefully you'll start to hear it. I'm very business minded with this stuff. Like I'm really like, I'm keeping an eye on things. Definitely notice stuff even this year that I will need to adapt and change. And every 6 months I appraise stuff unless it's really wrong, and then it happens immediately. I'm trying to remember your question. Hit me with it one more time.
Do you, like,
your add-ons?
Any other add-ons? Like, do you offer albums or anything like that?
So albums I'll do in the off season, and you get a really clear sense check. Couples will come to you and go, "Hey, we want to do that," and I'll do a bespoke layout with them with Folio, and I really like their system. And And then second photographer, sometimes I'll invest myself. If I notice something's changed vibe from when they book to a bit further down the line, and I see unnecessary timeline pressure, or if I see a big opportunity for the fact this is going to be the killer wedding this year, I'll invest. And I did that with 2 weddings in Sicily last month, where I was like, you know what? There are a few things in play here, and I just need to bring on a backup dancer. And like that's coming out of my pocket, and it's over servicing. And I think sometimes that that's going to make your life easier, and it's actually just like an end goal. It's a better thing. And then other times I go, hey, you guys are getting ready in different places. They're 25 minutes apart. You're getting married in 40 degrees of heat. I don't want the groom getting ready 3 hours earlier just so I can get there. This is absolutely a situation where we're going to look at a second photographer, and I'll recommend that on.
Yeah.
And whereas I used to think of second photographers as being a second creative point of view, and I brief people really specifically, now I'm like, there's two or three things going on here. Sometimes when people run a short, like reception hour or aperitivo in Italy, there are too many things that need to happen in that time, and therefore the reception doesn't get captured. And some couples will go, hey, I don't want to put any more money into this. And that's okay. I understand that you've got to do family portraits, table details, and our portraits in that window. And that's cool. And we just have that dialogue and keep it really light. And some people just don't have, don't necessarily put weight to certain parts of the day. And it's really, really helpful to know what matters to them. And then other people will go, hey, no, Dan, that's a great point. Can we get someone along? And then I'll send them 3 or 4 books of people I've worked with and go, hey, what do you respond to? I think this person will be amazing. They're available.
Yeah. It sounds like your couples, like you're really invested in your couples and they're really invested in you, and they want to be flexible to make sure you create the best work for them. Like where are you finding your clients, or where are they finding you, I guess? Like
it's hard
where's your referral sources usually?
Like if I look at analytics, sometimes it's just like straight up Instagram, and that's your shop window. And if people want to look further and take a step into your proverbial shop, they'll click on your website, and then we're into sort of a situation where they can kind of make a choice. They need a wedding photographer. Do they like this work? My pricing's on my website so that I don't have to deal with that sort of like misstep if someone inquires and then they go, whoa, too expensive. I try and make it like it's there on my inquiry page. This is my pricing. And that reduces my admin, but it also just means that it's a quick and like honestly, money is not the most important part of any of this stuff, but it's just the fact that I work at a rate that I shoot expensive and I work expensively because I'm putting more time in. So that's built the cost to a certain place. I also get a lot of Google traffic, which again, I think Lisa, who runs Photography Farm, is particularly good at that. And I need to chew her off and get a little bit more insight there. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that in October, because I haven't really done SEO and I haven't really done any of these things that people really dial. But I feel really lucky that there's a market of people that come to me and find me, and a lot of people just genuinely just see the work and go, hey, here's some details about what we're doing, and we think you might be a good fit. And you really know when someone's invested and when someone isn't from an inquiry form. So we like again, taking the stance that people are commissioning photography very rarely in their lives. You get a real sense for someone who sends out 20 messages and someone who sent out 1 message. And typically the people who send out 1 message get on a call quick and then book very quickly. And it's all, then those end up being sort of like really nurtured experiences. Whereas if you're in a pool of 30 people that they've blanket message, you get surprises all the way along, obviously. And people work hard, especially for their weddings. People will copy and paste stuff. But yeah, that's just been like a hugely interesting social thing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned Lisa, and we've not really talked about Thrive at all. We've just, which is good because we want people to get to know you before the event. But what do you expect to talk about at Thrive? Like, have you got a title for your talk yet?
Oh, it's on a notepad somewhere. I think
is that the title?
I think it's along the lines of chaos and creativity, and it's kind of how our talk's gone, if anything, about being very planned and then also being able to like totally loosen up. Being able to take in a starting point and then blow it out creatively. And a lot of the people I was doing one-to-one teaching with in the off season, which honestly was like such a lovely and joyful thing. And I probably learned more about me than I ever thought I would from that. Because you really understand stuff when you're teaching. You understand it so much better. So much what I was doing. And I definitely think for Thrive attendees, is something I'm really going to focus on is loosening people up, just loosening their style up. Like, it's not about taking more photos, but it's actually being intentional about how people see stuff and opening up how they see stuff. And that's going to be a real focus of what I'm talking about. Because I think often people are attending these things because they want to switch stuff up. And often people are engaging with education because they want to change something up. So when I have those one-to-ones, I'm triaging what's going wrong, and I'm seeing perfect horizons, and I'm seeing like absolutely pristine work but just needs a bit more vibe or a bit more humanity to it, or it needs a little bit more personality or individualism. And that's where I think chaos approach is really fun. I'll leave that nice and mysterious.
Yeah. Sounds interesting.
And obviously there's a day 2. Is that going to be, obviously your talk and your day 2 are different things. Are you still going to be like working with people in a practical sense?
Yeah, so
day 2 for
we all have diversified. Me and myself and the other 5 speakers have all diversified away from each other a bit, quite intentionally, so that people can find what suits them and how they like their coffee, so to speak. And mine's going to be an art directional set build, bridal prep, florals, drapery. It's gonna, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be sort of like stuff that people, I'm sure people want to shoot it for content, and I appreciate that's a part of these things nowadays. But for me, it's going to be about directing in the right way and seeing things in an interesting way, and handling the space well, handling the fashion well. And yeah, so it's definitely art directional. It's definitely, it's focusing on one person rather than 2. So a lot of the other shoots are couple based, whereas mine's just going to be bridal based and singular character based.
Yeah. Cool.
Exciting.
Shall we pull up some
tickets?
images?
But yeah, show and tell time. Now, you've got, again, a huge portfolio. So this isn't like focusing on what your portfolio is. It's just me going, I really like this image for this reason, and I want to hear your backstory. So a shot like this, first of all, you can see the TV?
Yeah.
Cool. A shot like this, I have John Dolan again in the back of my mind going, I never leave the bride. I always follow the bride. I'm like, really? You never like go to the ceremony and shoot anything away from the bride? Nope, always with the bride. This shot screams that to me. And also, correlating what you just said about, creating a vibe, there is that sort of thing here. And I love the movement of this shot. It feels very like you are with this bride and you are moving along with her. And I really like that kind of kinetic energy that comes from that. Can you talk about this shot in particular in regards to what I've just said?
Yeah,
or
sure.
even adding in another point of view?
And
I'm just going to crack open a beer here. 2 seconds. There you go.
Love that. Which beer is it?
Oh, it's a Day's non-alcoholic.
I'm all about that. I enjoy the non-alcoholic beers.
As do we.
So like for this one, I definitely think you'll show me images that were more about maybe what you've referenced. And that's the lovely thing about images. And sometimes the viewer can put the story to it. I did an art history degree, and people write books about things, and you ask the artist about it and they go that way, and you went this way, and you wrote a book and they said it's total opposite. And like, I'm pretty meat and bones with how I teach, and I'm pretty meat and bones about how I sort of like unpack stuff. And this generally was a good responsive documentary moment. This is our entering the dinner. And I even put up a TikTok of it, and it would fail me to over-aggrandize this one. This was me being ready, having an idea of a frame, and letting life happen. I step into this shot. I was nowhere near it. Again, that's the whole 28 thing. That's a crop on a 28.
Okay, so you do crop your 28.
Just sometimes. So the bride and groom had rinsed it down a hill into this sort of like horseshoe of tables. Sunsets behind the father of the groom's in the background there, but that's the top table, so to speak. And Holly had just changed herself out of a veil post the family portraits. And she's just like a absolutely vivacious, like absolutely was just in the best. She's always in the best mood. She's awesome. I'm really tight with them. And it honestly just was like a well-placed, but still needed me to move a bit. Cameras set up correctly. And that's what I mean by having like a Leica and having a fast camera. Is this wasn't taken on my fast camera. This was me knowing my distances and having free thought about it. I didn't know she was going to enter within 5 meters of where I was standing, so I had to move about 4 meters, and she continued to move away from me. So
yeah, I'm intrigued. What did you crop out? I suppose. Why did you crop this image? And I just want to hear
just to bring focus to her movement, her body angle, and I liked it feeling like the viewer, the father of the groom behind, like viewing back with like quite a joyful sort of expression. I just liked bringing that into frame. To be honest, like in the era of AI retouching, I probably would have cleared out that hand that's poking through on the left, but just to like further bring focus. I think it's a hand. I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Well, here.
Is that a hand or I don't know.
It's an arm. Yeah, it's an arm.
Like, that could have been cleaned up. It could have been an even better image. But yeah, this was generally like my documentary style kicking in, right, like almost right pace, not 100% the right place, but just getting myself moving my body.
Yeah. I actually, I'm going to be completely honest, Daniel. I didn't realize you were on TikTok. So I'm just on your TikTok just now. And there is content creation iPhone shots of that moment, which is really cool.
Yeah, it was
so you can see exactly where you are, which is
4 meters in the wrong direction,
kind of
right?
cool. Yeah. I love the fact that you've shown that. Who's taking that phone footage?
Honestly, it was a guest who sent it to the bride, and then the bride sent it to me, being like, "Dan, I can't believe you took that photo, given how ordinary and like you just look like." I think he messaged me being like, "I love you so much. You're like giving pure dad energy here," and then you just step in and ninja it. And I genuinely like. I spend a lot of time. Again, I know this is in the context of Thrive. I spend a lot of time talking about sort of like ninja stuff where you just sort of like you just go in and you grab something and you step out, and like I'm not about like burst rate photos. I'm all about individual frames. This was one shot. I think you can see in that TikTok video, I literally took one frame.
Yeah, you put it up to your face very quickly and grab it. It's yeah. By the way, I love your casual vibe at wedding. There seems to be this conversational point at the moment where people are like really like making sure that photographers are dressed smartly and like overly done up all the time.
Yeah,
I kind of like your casual vibe here.
It's definitely it varies quite a lot, wedding to wedding.
Sure.
So that was 23rd of August last year. It's under the city wall of Assisi. It was a flat square that had sunlight on it, and it was a total sun trap. It was 41 degrees, and I made a call the day before because I bring all the stuff. I generally have range within what I bring clothing wise, because I do think there's an element of there's 100 plus eyes on you. You definitely have to hit a certain level. And this one generally was about survival, and not to like over, like it generally was 41 degrees. I had 2 camera shutdowns because they got too hot.
Wow.
So that day, me and the video guy, both in shorts, both matching linen. Like sometimes it's, and I've spoken to a decent number of photographers, and some days when you're 40 degrees, it's got to be a collared linen shirt and linen pleated shorts. There's intention there, but like I wore a hat. I had to. Like it honestly was sunstroke for the groom, sunstroke for the bride if they didn't plan their day well either.
Yeah.
Whereas the one this weekend, I'm wearing like a really specific pleated trouser, a really specific like boiler jacket, and I like this sort of like sense of that I love the brand language of Aesop, and it's like a bit of an atelier, and I like moving through a wedding feeling like a bit of a staff member at an atelier, bit of a craftsman sort of thing. So I'm not a suit wearer. I don't think this, again, jumping thoughts and try not to trump too far. I think of weddings as sort of your game day. If you've got training periods during the week, Saturday's your game day. You've got to wear stuff you can move in. You've got to wear stuff that you're not going to put yourself in hospital in, especially in hot places. And I typically don't like moving well in a double-breasted or a single-breasted suit. So linen's really helpful. Pleated stuff's really helpful because it gives smartness, but they can be more comfy. I do think, although that wedding was casual, that was a bit of a what's the word? A 1 in 10. It was generally just too hot to function.
Yeah. It's good that you can approach things differently. And you're not tied down to putting yourself in a position of injury, to aptly put it. Next image, Greg. Right. So this is one of those commissioned images that I referred to earlier, where I really did get a sense of your detail to how the dress was moving. I actually really love this shot. The angles, the way the light's coming in, the colors, and the voyeuristic type vibe of the angle and your approach to this kind of camera angle.
So
on your subject, I really liked it. Tell me more about this project in general, though, because you've got, I think, 2 commissions on your website. I think
there's more in the background. I'm working on them and making them look how I want them to. But I don't typically find these sort of commissions actually move weddings or market weddings, and I don't look at them to do that. I generally use them as a bit of brain flexing and using my head and like pulling on more esoteric photography practices and image making. I generally don't think that wedding work requires what this shoot requires, and that's okay. And I don't think people need to commission me off what I can do here. And some people might want to do that.
Sure.
So again, like I want to be like pragmatic about it. This is lit. I've done it intentionally. I've dragged a cinema light to where you've said the light source is coming from. There was some source there, but then I upped it with an aperture bicolor 600X.
Okay.
I'm on an RB67 medium format camera using Cinestill so that I can get that bluishness, because that's a tungsten weighted film. So I'm using a tungsten light on her dress so I can get a bit of warmth in there and some correct color balance. But then I'm letting the film be a certain tone in the shadow. And I know I can correct that later if I need to, either by printing or playing with it. And my print of that image is quite different because I paint even more. Really? But I'll send you what that looks like.
I'd love to see it.
It would be too slow to get it out. But yeah, this especially when I'm looking into that camera, I'm looking down into that camera rather than looking through. I'm looking down, and that gives me a very squared off frame, and it gives me a very specific viewpoint in. And the frame there was low to high, and I like the way the stairs sort of moved you through as a leading line.
Yeah. It's these straight angles as well that make me just love this image. Yeah, very nice, very nice.
And then it's about the dress there is Sank, who are the designer. Some people call them Sink, some people call them Sank. It's spelled like the French number 5. They're based out in LA, and the commission came through. I was staying in the south of France on a family holiday between weddings and using it as a bit of a jump off point. And I got a video Instagram message from Maddie, who works there. It's like 3 or 4 minutes. We talked previously like over chat because she'd seen a previous wedding I did. And she'd then seen the work I'd done with the full bride with some of their dresses. And she was like, we've got this chateau and we've got this window and it's in 2 weeks. What do you think? And the model is the lead model at Doan, which is my wife's like favorite dress brand. And there's just like so many elements of, let's just roll this. And it was 5th of September this year. And it was like the absolute peak of my wedding season. And it was on a midweek between 2 like sizable weddings. And I was like, I'm going to be roasted. We're going to just need to make this happen. And just about managed to squeeze it through. I think it was an 8-shoot month. It was really, my commercial work had slightly peaked its head. And that was maybe my last September of letting that happen. So I had 4 weddings, 3 commercials, and then this editorial came in. But yeah, this was really low budget and all about how practical and how big an image I could create with the tools that I brought along.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I mean, there are a ton of other images, by the way, on Daniel's commissioned page on his website. Definitely go check them out because they are all very beautiful. Next image, Gregory. Yes. So, I picked this image because, again, it's that movement and vibe, but in a particular moment where probably movement and vibe gets shunted to the side. This is a group image I'm assuming this is the friends and family portraits section of the day.
It was the last portrait in the set of 7 or 8, I think, from that day. I have a bit of a rule around family portraits is either I'm trying to build some texture or I'm building some sort of like high and low, a bit like we talked about flat lays, is creating visual interest and having like a point of view going into them. And some couples just want them straight and traditional, and that's so fine. And there are certain weddings a year, and I'm not going to do this at every single wedding, and I don't think that's sort of helpful for people watching this to think I do it every single time. Because some weddings, they are just straight and perfect, and it's about getting those shots for the various generations that really care about them. I'd say I'm moving towards maybe 50-50 on that now. This one was one where I was like, I've got my film camera out and I've got my digital camera out. Film camera, I'm going to set with a bit of motion at a 20th of a second with a slightly like higher f-stop. And I'm just going to let them move towards me as a unit. I was just like, come at me, guys. Let's just vibe this out. Just walk at me. This is catwalk. Everyone's having their own catwalk. You're just going to storm at me. And I think I took 2 frames. And it was honestly, like, again, for people sort of looking at their own family portraits, there are weddings where you have younger guests. Like the generational sort of focus was, I want to have a higher ratio of friends at this wedding and less family. This was a very friends-focused wedding, which means you can hit different heights from the family portraits.
Yeah. Do you take the safe version of this shot, like them all lined up, nice and crisp? You can see everyone's face.
We did about, let's say I did 3 or 4 versions of the safe version. but they're all quite fun. And everyone who was in that frame, they were all like huge, brilliant, like charismatic people that really enjoyed over the day and the day before as well, because I'd met a decent number of them at the welcome event. And they would just generally all had individuality. And I was just like, guys, let's just get this really like chosen family portrait of you guys, because these people have just found each other. They're all YouTubers from all over the world. Some of them are like key family as well. There's like a bridesmaid or two in there, and like a in-law or two in there. But there's a decent number of sort of like internet personalities in this image, and like all of them have their way of moving through the world. But they're really tight, and they all found each other. And I was like, I just want to get something that sort of like shows that like tightness. So we did like a couple of really silly ones. We did sort of Royal Tenenbaums, like ultra serious one, where they all sort of looked like they were stone cold murderers, and I love that one too. And then I just had them guys vibe at me and walk at me. Yeah,
it just looks like genuine joy in everybody in this image.
If you can have a really good time with family portraits, that is like peak. Where like I think you hit like May or June in your season, you go, I'm enjoying family portraits at this point, having a good time with them. And there are always days where they're tense and difficult, and there are always days where you can be like so planned, and a key family member will be like, but what about this person? And the couple have no interest in that person coming in. And you just take the shot. And I always just say to the couple, hey, I will deliver you this shot and you choose what to do with it. It can sit on a hard drive somewhere, and just don't let it break your day. I'll take 10 seconds over it. And like, you just get in and out.
Yeah. Cool. That's good. Good approach, I think. Yeah, awesome. I suppose that brings us to the end. Greg, would you like to ask your question?
You've got some photo books in front of you. Do you have a book that you could recommend to our listeners to go check out, whether it be photo or business, whatever comes to mind?
I actually found like just here again that I find so much value in what you guys do, because you hear perspective. Didn't mean to look at the word behind you and then say it. I did. I'm going to counter the question a little bit. And there was a podcast you guys did last year with Sophie Berard, and I've had a few chats with her, and I re-listened to it last night going into this, having not really, I've done teaching, I've done lecturing, I haven't done podcasts. And I genuinely was like listening to her being like, you know what? That is how I feel about that. That is how I feel about that. But she's so beautifully laid that out. And I don't think there are many people like her who have such an eloquence around the business side, but also like so ultra artistic. So that podcast, I think, was like a through line for someone who never will, like, it's a resource that's on the internet readily available for people. They don't have to chuck millions of pounds into education to hear these like pearls and pearls and pearls. In an actual printed sense, there's one thing I do that is super far removed again from this, which is I go and print in the darkroom in London, a place called Rapid Eye, and there's a community in there of all different photographers who are just shooting really different work. But there's like this communal force of the fact we talk about stuff and we like share technique and we show each other what we're doing. And I get a lot of inspiration from that. And you see stuff that's coming out as campaigns later in the year. Like someone in the corner will be doing like a massive fashion campaign and someone in the corner will be printing a photo of their son. But it's like really like esoteric and amazing. And like just being in that like bubble of stuff that's nothing to do with weddings is really, it sort of like I think we can get very caught up in what we do. And it totally sort of democratizes that. Photos are photos, images are images. What does image say? And therefore, I generally think that people who are getting more into film photography, these communities are out there and they're really like nurturing. And people don't ask for anything. I think in weddings, you get asked for money a lot. It's like when you want to take the next step, sometimes there's a quick way of doing it through education. Sometimes there's a slow step through doing reps, and like taking yourself out of context and just experiencing visuals being made is just like really helpful.
Yeah. Nice.
I agree.
Seek
Very
out
nice.
some community in real life,
I
particularly.
was thinking the whole time
Yeah,
there that
absolutely.
there's a book that I read recently that I absolutely love the photographer, and the book didn't look right. And I love their work that they put on Instagram, and I love the work they print in the darkroom. And it was just their publisher like changed the vibe of the images through the texture
really?
choice, the print ink, just didn't come out the same as the work. So my
Yeah.
thing is I'm really inspired by the photographers I like see and experience. A lot of my reference point and enjoyment comes from like luxury travel. A lot of my reference point comes from sort of those sort of like specific brands doing like really beautiful spaces and really beautiful architecture, really natural light pouring through them. It's almost like it's not always that much wedding imagery. And then there's those really key players who you see stuff every week, and it's almost like they're turning up to an auditorium every week to put their mark on it. And you're just like, every time you're sort of like, you're opening up on Monday and being like, wow. And that's a nice part of what we do too.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us on this episode of Perspective. Where can people find you and your work?
So I'm on Instagram at Daniel Knight Harris. Then have a website with the same name. If you want to hunt out my commercial work, you just add the word Alexander in there, like we said. That's Daniel Alexander Harris, and it's helpful to sometimes see what I've done elsewhere to bring it back to how I do weddings. And TikTok's new. I'm not really putting my face on there yet, and I appreciate that's a thing people do. But I've just been putting images up there, playing counterflow.
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking and a little bit cringy to put your face on stuff and be like, look what I can do.
It's also it's the market you're in. Like as soon as you start charging sort of like above a certain rate, I know when I'm on a call with someone, like I back myself that I'm a normal, friendly human and I know what I'm doing. But TikTok's like you can get a real different vibe of someone off them. So I just feel like sometimes it does more damage than good. So I'm just like, I'm going to put my pretty photos in there.
I mean, yeah, I can understand that. There's definitely a balance.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're worried about platforms, make sure you know where your clients are coming from and what they're interested in. Anyway, people can find us at perspectivebycinemate.com, or Instagram and YouTube at Perspective by Cinemate. Thank you to PickTime for sponsoring another episode of this podcast. And are you ready for Thrive? I've read that wrong again. Are you ready to thrive? Get ready for your 2-day all-star wedding photography conference taught by 6 phenomenal speakers on the 22nd and 23rd of October at the Leonardo Royal Hotel in Brighton. The best industry sponsors will be there. Small group sessions with the speakers. Beautiful portfolio content, obviously. You get your lunch and snacks. Brighton's a cool city with a cool vibe. You do, in fact, get a goodie bag.
Mm-hmm.
You get to hang out with your industry peers. And did I mention the snacks, Craig? I like a snack. Anyway, buy your tickets. Lisa says you're going to have a good time. Buy your tickets. If you have enjoyed our conversation, please do hit subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Ideally, YouTube. But I'll leave that up to you. And hopefully, we'll see you in the next one. However,
In the meantime,
enjoy your Thrive.